What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to How's It Going to End? How you doing? That's great. Today, I am joined by the writer and director of one of my favorite films this year so far, You Won't Be Alone, a story about a young witch observing human life firsthand, which is still in theaters. So you are depriving yourself of this experience if you do not see it. Goran Stolevski, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm very, very excited to have you on. When Matt mentioned at the end of our episode that he'd contact you, I was trying very hard to stifle my excitement so that I wouldn't come off as like such a dweeb. Um, I've been lucky enough with social media to use that as a means to connect with the people I've spoken to. So for him to make that assist was incredibly kind. And I know you're also busy, so I'm grateful for your time. You're busy working on your next feature, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. Oh no, it's very new to me that anyone would be excited to speak to me. So this is all very cool, man. It's all good.
Oh, well, thanks. Um, First things first, before anything, if you had the ability to take the shape of anyone in history, who would it be and why?
Oh wow. I'm dividing, I'm sort of split between doing it with a politician or artist. I'd probably end up being the artist.
Yeah,
But it would probably be someone in the future rather than now. So I'd cryogenically freeze myself. I'm more curious about what happens
that's smart.
next.
Yeah, I went with uh,
Um,
I went with Julius Caesar up until the
yeah.
assassination, and then I dip, and then I'm out of there. Get to be married
Yeah.
to Cleopatra for a little bit and all that stuff, right?
Oh yeah, you're right. I haven't thought about who I would be able to have sex with. You're right. That would be the priority. No, that would definitely be the
And
priority. Leave
yeah,
this with me.
um, so I've completely refocused my notes because I'm trying to lean away from Matt's specialty of cinematography and more into the narrative construction because I am so excited to talk to you about what went into writing a film like this. Matt mentioned that after your short film, Would You Look at Her, premiered at Sundance, that you talked with producer Christina Seaton and you gave her a bunch of scripts and she landed on this one and you were kind of like surprised that this is the one she responded to. Can I hear about that?
Yeah, I mean, knowing her now, I'm not surprised in retrospect. But no, it was surprising in the sense that, like this is coming from the context of, I mean, I wrote most of these scripts before Would You Look at Her, which, went to Sundance. So that was quite useful to my life at the time. But before that, I was very much like nothing and no one, and sort of like an aspiring filmmaker for like 20 years by that point, and aspiring meaning failed. So, I had all these screenplays that had accumulated, but yeah, at the time when I was trying to write, I was trying to think of it's not even strategically, just what was makeable, what was
Yeah.
achievable. And I thought it would have to be something low budget and modest. And most of my background was in relationship drama. And I still, love relationship drama. It wasn't like,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I had a collection of scripts accumulated by the time I went to Sundance. And then I sort of had them all summarized, in a paragraph summary, and I always kept You Won't Be Alone towards the end, just because I thought I would come off as so ridiculous to
Mm-hmm.
anyone if they read this
It's
idea
so
first.
out there.
Well, yeah. And,
Yeah.
you've seen the movie now. And I mean, to me, it feels like it's worked out okay. But if you just have this random dude coming at you with like, look, it's about witches, but it's about their feelings, okay?
Yeah.
And also lots of their specific dialogue around that, like, I wouldn't listen to me. So I don't know why anyone else would.
Well, there's something so I mean inspiring in a film so as unique as this one because it really is just out there on every level to actually get made and
mm,
especially considering the stuff that's making money these days. So yeah, no, this one really I'm incredibly excited when it's however it's available to get a hold of the screenplay because I was telling Matt how interesting it is that like a film like this, which I've been saying it has a handicap in that it has a mute protagonist, so you have to you have to heavily lean into those visuals, but at the same time you get her narration, so everything is kind of
mm,
beautifully led along. So I'm interested to see what else is on the page.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's quite close to what we ended up with the film. I mean, there's a lot of scenes we added in the sense that, especially the second half of the filming went quite smoothly, so we could improvise a lot of
Yeah.
scenes on set, which was good. And because of the style of filming we had with Maddie C and also Beth Ryan, the production designer,
Hmm.
we had a lot of spaces that kind of almost existed like as a 360-degree setup,
Yeah.
even on a very low budget. So we could kind of venture off and shoot a lot of stuff additionally. But I think a lot of it is just as it is in the screenplay.
Yeah.
And then, I'm not sure how things go about releasing that or publishing that. I'm very new to this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder how people would react to the script. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm interested. I don't know. You guys manipulated that that mountain range in Serbia so beautifully. I mean, you're able to like cover miles and miles almost, and within the same area. What was it like finding location scouting and then deciding on there and manipulating that area?
Mm. I mean, you have to feel incredibly fortunate, because I didn't write it. No, when I wrote it, I was thinking of a specific region where we weren't able to film, which was in my native Macedonia.
Mhm.
Serbia is just, across the ditch, like it's right next to it. So it's not like it was a compromise by any means. But I didn't know this part of Serbia at all.
Mhm.
So essentially, once it was decided that we had to film in Serbia, we had a location scout, Stefan Todorovic, kind of drive around the country. Basically, I gave him very, very specific, notes as a brief, like literally, it needs to be on a slant, and houses need to be
Yeah.
this relation to each other, which is, you get as specific as possible, just so that you spark off ideas, because you're always going to adapt to what's there. But yeah, he found this spot that actually, in the photos he sent us photos from a bunch of villages, and then there was this one, and it already looked very, workable just off the photos. And then it was the first place we looked at. And even though we had the idea of sort of going around the region to look at other things, from the moment we landed in the village, it kind of presented itself like to us with everything we could need and more. And we kept finding more and more spots sort of within walking distance, or short drive around it. And then you're kind of like, when you start prepping a film, you don't have enough hours in the day or time in the world. So as soon as something that looks like a solution presents itself to you, you're
Mhm.
like, okay, is this workable? Oh my god, it
Yeah.
is. This is what it's gonna be.
Cling to it. Yeah.
So yeah, and in this case, I think we were very spoiled for choice, because there was always like 2 or 3 locations we were choosing between that were equally kind of beautiful, and very accessible to us. We were very lucky again that the villagers were very enthusiastic to have us there. And yeah, just very fortunate.
Yeah. I mean, they're what a place to kind of what a territory to discover nature and humanity for a
Mm,
character like Navina to wander into such a beautiful location, and she finds beauty in the little things all the way
mm,
to the sunsets and the grand scale. Um,
mm,
speaking of Navina, you have how are you able to find 4 people to portray the same person so well? Because it is unreal how well
mm,
Sarah and Numi and Carlotto and Alice were able to embody Navina and her. It's the same curiosity for life across all
mm,
4 people, and it's like the character marker. How were you able to get all these guys? Because I know you worked with Sarah in your previous
mm.
short, but the rest of them, it's a perfect combination.
Yeah, I knew Alice personally. I hadn't worked with her before, but Carlotta and Numi I met through the movie. I was sort of like just looking at people's work, getting a sense of people who are kind of fearless and can lose themselves into a story world, and sort of. I think both with Numi and Carlotta, looking at their previous films, you get a sense that the movie absorbs them, so they're
Mhm.
kind of carried away with it, and which is how I work, in the sense that the movie takes over and absorbs me. I feel like it directs me. I don't direct it, like, so I feel like instinctively I'm looking for people who have that kind of sense of it's never about an individual. It's about, we're all kind of in service to something else.
That's
So I
interesting.
think I was looking for that element, and also kind of fearlessness as an
Mhm.
actor, like, the readiness to humiliate yourself if necessary, because I have
Yeah.
that too. Um, but no, the nicer way to phrase it is fearlessness. Because yeah, they're completely unflappable, all those guys, and just we connected as people very intensely. I mean, that was lucky. I'd kind of decided to cast them before meeting them, essentially,
Yeah.
and then it was just like I feel like with each other's actors, I had a very intense personal connection, and then a separately intense connection to the character they were playing, and it was kind of a triangle of feelings
Yeah.
we would set up with each of them. And yeah, like some of it was in the script in terms of the mannerisms and gentle reminders in the prose,
Yeah.
as to how it's evolving, and but they also had a lot of freedom, and especially with all of them, like I wanted to also capture, because you kind of fall in love with these people and you want to
Oh yeah.
capture something of their own. I want that preserved in a movie, and then because each iteration the character shapeshifts through, she kind of grows anyway. I think she would take on a little bit of the actor that's playing her, and then we would kind of figure out a way to absorb that. And the way, like, I'm very conscious of how I'm going to be editing the film while I'm shooting it, or writing it for that matter. The second feature I'm doing, I'm editing myself, actually. I've edited, it's done. So I'm always very hyper aware of what the through line might be and setting up these connections, even just for a movie, for a story, but especially in this case where it's meant to be the same person. And it is essentially the same person that's being played.
Truly. I mean, it's unreal that it's like insane to me that there's that base of innocent curiosity of the world around her, and then it's each person portrays that perfectly, and then also adds on, like, because at the same time she's learning about around her, and when
Mm,
she's
mm,
when she is Basilica, she's learning about social groups, and she's learning about what the women, when they gather and they do, and when they're in the the glory of their husbands, what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to treat them and all that. And then I love that the narration isn't necessarily in 1945 Brooklyn, like Scorsese narration, you know what I
yeah.
mean? Where it's
Yeah,
like it's reading facts. It's these are like thoughts. These are just passing
yeah.
by her, and she's kind of grabbing at them. So like when she's realizing, when they raise their eyebrows, you raise their eyebrows. When they are laughing, it's just so she's learning and she's evolving, and then passing into Boris, and it's just incredible. And also there's something so interesting to me about how there can never be an argument for someone saying that they can't relate to a character in a movie because they don't identify with them, because I am neither a woman nor a
Mm,
witch. And every bit of Navina's like curiosity for life clicked instantly with me. It's just
mm.
it's untouchable. I don't think that argument holds up anymore.
No, I completely agree. I think we need to go away from demographics as a point of identification. The
Yeah.
people I feel most closely connected to are usually like nothing to do with me,
Yeah.
in terms of background or gender or whatever. And like I think especially that's what I was drawn to. I'm always looking to I think there's a craving to connect with someone deeply whenever I'm making a movie. Both, firstly, I create the characters for that reason, to connect with them, but they're fictional. And then you realize you're trying to connect with the viewer just as deeply through them. And I think that needs to be, but I also don't want any limitations as to what kind of, anytime they're talking about who's your audience, everyone always tries
Yeah.
to limit it to the same gender and age as the character. And that's not true for me as a viewer or as a filmmaker. So I sort of feel like, especially with this movie, not that I set out ideologically or trying to, make a statement, but I think there is an essence that kind of transcends these things. And I very much want to honor the specifics of what each, person and body has to go through in the world we put them. Obviously, in this movie, we do that. But I think there's an essence, a soul, for lack of a better term, that I think that's where you connect with another person. And the way I live my life, I definitely don't want to be sort of constricted by a binary concept of gender, or even my ethnicities. I want to, I see them as things I need to transcend to live as full a life as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the work is a reflection of that. I didn't set out to, make these statements, but like, I just kind of trust to that what when I write, I try to do it from instinct rather than thinking it through. It's only when I'm developing it and polishing it that, the rational part of the brain kicks in. But yeah, I trust that the ideology kind of comes through, because I definitely believe in sort of what art can do in terms of shaping people ideologically. But I think it needs to come from a very honest, unfiltered place for it to connect with someone.
I mean, it's truly unbelievable. I walked out of the theater, and I made this comparison with Matt. The idea of walking out of a movie theater and then going into like I saw the movie theater I saw that is near the One World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, and so walking out of a theater, it's walking out of a cave into this grand skyscrapers touching all this blue sky and everything, and so many people, and it's very much like I left the theater with that same curiosity of like, oh, look, like I'm looking at the way the sun hits the clouds differently today for some reason, and it's because I'm taking that aspect of
Oh my
Navina
God,
with
that's
me.
incredible.
And of course, I cannot forget Old Maid Marie. Anna Maria Marinka brought such a, dude, heartbreakingly beautiful performance to this film. My favorite aspect is we go, as a viewer, we go from seeing her as the village terror, the wolf eatress and all that, and then seeing her as like this, harsh maternal, just a harsh maternal figure who, we need blood, and very like, not cutesy, like instantly breaks the bunny's neck, and it's like, focus, pay attention, and then going to, this human being who, as she said herself, saw no good of life, which is just such a biting line, you know what I mean? And what was the process behind that duality between Old Maid Maria and Navina? Because you have one who saw no good of life and then got turned into a witch, and you have one who saw nothing of life and got turned into a witch. I think there's an interesting human parallel there.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel like, even the one that saw nothing of life sort of, I guess one of the main points of difference is that Nevena, like, even when she was traumatized, she didn't realize it was trauma because she didn't know.
Yeah, she had
She was like,
no basis of anything.
yeah, and I guess there was almost an element of protection in that, possibly. But yeah, I feel like, there's so I mean, those two women are basically my brain split in half. So I sort of,
Yeah.
there's a lot of me in both of them.
Mhm.
And I feel like both of their reactions to how the world is, pushing them into a corner, I think both of their reactions are perfectly valid.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
There's
I
the
don't feel like, I mean, obviously I know one is sort of presented as what would normally be the monster to start with.
Mhm.
But I understand that person, very deeply from the first moment. Like when the story came to me on initially, like the character of Maria came all in one, together, both in terms of the backstory and who she is now. So I don't know. I do often understand the people who kind of act out in an evil way.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking supernatural stories. In a lot of places, especially like the ones with the more female energy, it makes sense to me, this kind of version of feelings and thoughts. So yeah, and ultimately, I guess the movie is about how the world kind of does everything to destroy these two women, and one of them still somehow holds on to that, ability to hope
Mhm.
and want to connect, or even hope to connect. Yes. And the other one is completely extinguished, and she realizes it in herself by the end, and she, as much as she wants to deny it to herself, she just becomes so blindingly aware.
Mhm.
She's heartbroken, I knew, by that. And I don't want to kind of, I didn't want to set out to sort of make the difference between them something that's neatly verbalized.
Yeah.
You followed it through the movie. There's this approach and there's this approach. I understand it, and I feel connected to both of them, really. But there is that difference, and I think there's a tragedy in that. That to me, that's what makes me cry when
Oh
I
yeah.
watch the movie
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and what I connect to.
there are two moments in the film that absolutely broke me emotionally. I mean, like up turning into a puddle in my seat. There's that entire sequence of Navina as Boris, discovering um the dead young body of Bilyana, and that true, weeping of the loss of such of human life at such a young age, which I think is something that, I mean, in stark contrast to when she killed
Mm,
Basilga, is just like, oh wow, interesting. This is now that transformation is very, uh analytical, and this one is so much more emotional. So to go
mhm,
from that and then immediately into the arms of a caring mother and
mm.
hanging out with friends and on a swing, and she has that line, I didn't know, and it twists me every time, and it destroys me. And then to follow that up, I mean, back to this, relationship between the two of them, back to follow that up with how was it so simple for you, is
Mm.
just a heartbreaker, because you think about, essentially they both wanted to be the halves of what the other one wanted.
Mm.
Maria wanted to be a mother, and she wanted that completion of a family, and then that fulfillment. And then Nevina wanted, or at least she didn't realize until she wanted it, until she had it, to be that, that child in a environment that wasn't a dungeon cave,
Yeah.
So what
It
was it
helps.
like? What was it like constructing that, bittersweet fork in the road for these two characters, these two outcomes, where one is, I mean, it's a beautiful tragedy. Like truly, you can't think about it without going, oh, I could have. Part of me is always thinking, like, for aspects of life, it could have been, and this is the ultimate
Yeah,
version.
because they both have that capacity to connect. Really, just obviously, one of them is destroyed by life and time.
Mhm.
Yeah, because a lot of time, and I think other viewers' version of this movie is more valid than my own, because I
Mhm.
bring to connotations that are probably just in my head and not actually on screen. So, but yeah, for me, like when people talk about it in the context of motherhood or family, I sort of just felt like, to me, it's about connections. It's a more universal thing. And then I think motherhood and family was just what was available in that particular setting as a way to connect with someone. When I kind of am writing stories set in a different world, and, you know, 2 streets away from where I live is a different world. Like
Yeah,
everything is
yeah,
a different world to me. But I'm always like, okay, so I have this, primal instinctive need. Sometimes I know how to verbalize it, sometimes I don't. And then, like, but I'm in this particular world. So what is the way that I would find to satisfy it? So I think with both of them, there's just a desire to connect and be kind of, I guess, accepted and loved unconditionally. For Maria, it feels like she needs someone to be subservient and finally do everything. It's kind of a twisted
yeah.
sense. And for Nevin, it's a more open approach, but I think an absence of cruelty would help.
Oh yeah,
So I didn't really like. Um, Again, I didn't set out to like comment in terms of like parenthood or
yeah,
family specifically. It's just going from what is the primal, stuff that this feeling is made of, and how do you find succor for it, in the time and place where you've been, dumped out of the
yeah,
universe, without kind of idealizing things too much. Like, I didn't want to make life easier around them, in the sense that I think that's almost unfair. Most people who,
oh
live in a
yeah,
world, things
absolutely.
can be made easy for them. I'm just like, a lot of us have get a raw deal as to where and how we're born, and then it's like, to me, though, it's still like, even if the dire as bleak as circumstances, you need to live. You need to
Yeah,
figure out a way. How do I find happiness or contentment? And yeah, I just have a lot more empathy for the people who have to do it in very harsh circumstances, and persist in looking for it the way Nevina does. Even the way Maria did, to an extent, like when she set out to do what she did in the, as a young woman. Like, it was looking for something under difficult circumstances. So yeah, and then the story, I guess ultimately the story emerges out of, that's the instinct I go in with, and then that's what the movie is now.
And that's what makes it truly, that's what makes it so universal, is that the anchors that kind of tie everything down emotionally are so broad that anyone is able to, you know, put themselves onto those experiences, because it's just so universal of a story and of human experiences.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of always want to, I think, as an artist, you always want to sort of retain, as I think, by making things more specific, you really do make them more universal, because they start to seem more real. And then once you, I think it helps a person transport, you know, a viewer be transported to a particular place and story. And the more real it seems, the more open I think you are as a viewer to connect to what's going on at the core. And then real universality can kick in only under very specific circumstances.
Yeah.
At least that's what I find. I don't know.
No, absolutely. Something that I think visually, I was telling Matt, this is the one of the best, you know, partnerings of score. Mark Bradshaw's score is phenomenal, and cinematography and writing and performance. And I think that's one of my favorite aspects of that entire combination, is there's this specific framing that I love so much about the film, is that whoever the subject is, more often than not, is on the fringe of the frame. And I love that so much, especially when it comes to a story like this, because, you know, when we're with Sarah, and she finally gets let out of the dungeon, and you see her, you know, experiencing the wind and the grass and like bugs and dirt, and just, you know, the natural aspects of just like of life outside. And she's on the fringe of that frame, so they're like maybe like 95% of the rest of the frame is the world around her, and you're kind of left there as a viewer being like, holy shit, like this is everything. She's experiencing it all at once right now. And then to keep that going through, where it's very much like every version of her is still taking something in no matter what. And it creates distance, like those shots where she's looking at, oh God, how do you forget his name? The one she marries in the end, those shots where they're kind of like averting their gaze at each other, and they're both on each end of the frame, and you can feel the tension across the frame of like the screen of the movie theater. Like, oh man, this is just, you can feel the distance, and everything's closing in, getting tighter and tighter. What was Matt said actually, that you would often say like sliver. You would want, you know, stuff on the edges of the frame. I it's just one of my favorite visual qualities of the film. What went into that thought process specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's often very instinctive. Like, I think essentially, I'm looking for, like, you know, maximum subjectivity, I guess, in the filmmaking. Like, to me, every frame and cut and sound is about putting, you know, a viewer under her skin, you know, in the perspective of Nevena, and then briefly, yeah, in the movie. So it's, and everything on set, especially because we shoot very fast, because in that almost documentary style, and there's a certain adrenaline that takes over, which I think is helps the performance a lot, and then the rest of us have to kind of work around that. So it's an instinctive process, but there's a, you know, across all the short, I made a lot of short films. So as much as this is my first movie, I've made a lot of films.
Yeah.
I think I just instinctively I built up this process of trying to get a sense of who is, how is the person feeling right now, and what is the composition or framing that kind of best reflects that, and the rhythm as well. And also I mean, the editing choices are also very key to this. We have a lot of footage, you know, and there was a lot of freedom on set, so that I could eventually had the materials to sort of craft, you know, the movie it is now. But yeah, I think a lot of the time with the framing, it can't really be verbalized for me. Like, I think I probably could, but I think the feeling needs to precede the rationale, because I think if you're coming at it intellectually, it never quite and because I have tried to do that,
Yeah.
I go like, we're gonna do this shot this way because this is what it represents. And then you look at it and it's like, no, it's just flat and weird. Like
Yeah. The
it's
more
sort of
purpose that's it almost takes away from
yeah,
the
yeah, because I
instinctual
think
aspect of it.
it needs to direct you, like I said.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
that's
you need
really
to be
smart. Yeah.
finding it, not like presenting it, I guess.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I think a lot of the time it's about like keeping up, when the world is overwhelming, but I still want to keep the subjectivity. That's where they would end up in those sliver
Oh,
compositions. And it's like, to me, it comes from a feeling I get when I'm a little bit overwhelmed by something. Like I know I'm slightly present, but I feel like only the edge of my face is entering and the rest of me is left out. So
that's
it
really interesting.
genuinely just goes to the feeling I have in this particular setting, at that moment, if I am this person. um and or when I'm, often the camera is behind them, but it's a specific distance, so it kind of feels like they're being watched, but also like it's their perspective, because I don't know, I
Hmm.
can feel, even when it's me, sometimes from my perspective I can feel a bit small, and distance from where I am, but also it is me. So I don't know, it's hard to verbalize these things, I guess,
Yeah.
but it
No,
comes from a
absolutely.
specific place, feeling, and then when the frame clicks with what I'm feeling, that's when I know, it's an instinctive thing again. That's when I
Yeah.
know it's working. And often again, like, I mean, I do shot list obsessively. Like with this movie, I had two versions of every single scene shot listed. One it was in months in advance, and then the night before I would shot list everything we were shooting that day. And in the morning we would arrive on set and I would burn the shot list and never think about it again, because it was like, it's about processing it in terms of processing the feelings, and then it's what's in front of me. And with the shot list, I'm trying to get at what is the feeling I want, and then it's on set, what's in front of me and how do I get that feeling. It's not necessarily what I
Yeah.
planned when I was on my laptop the night before.
There's
It's gonna be the right way. So yeah.
there's a lacking almost of like grace to the manufactured aspect of it all, to trying to manufacture those moments and those frames, and then there's just it just shines when it's done, in the moment and instinctually like that. It's just it's
Mm-hmm.
incredible.
And there's also a simple feeling you're chasing, like you're looking for the moment that, oh, this feels like a movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Oh,
feel like a bunch of people
everybody.
running on the hill with a
It happens
camera.
to everybody all the
Yeah,
time. If I'm on
yeah.
if I'm on the platform waiting for a train, there's I mean, I don't know, but I'll just speak for myself. There's always that aspect, like if there was a live crowd watching me, like how would I look? What I try
Mm,
to convey from myself? But no, absolutely. There's
mhm,
my favorite. I have two shots that I need to blow up and put on my wall. That shot of Boris from behind looking at the tops of clouds while he's sitting in the
yeah,
field. Oh my God. That's phenomenal. It's one of, I don't know the painting. I should have checked. I think it's like the Traveler or something. It looks just like this painting of a guy. He's just standing at the edge of this cliff, and you see the tops of these clouds that go for miles and miles. And it's
yeah.
just, I can't help but like there's a feeling of opportunity and there's a feeling of, literally anything is possible. And it's just, it's so,
Mhm,
and it's in that, montage of Boris kind of like, going through the weeds and then, ripping an apple apart. And it's just,
mhm.
it incredible. And then the edit that leads to the cut that leads to my other favorite frame is after Biljana's wedding. And
Mhm.
it just cuts right to Maria in the woods from far
Oh,
away.
right. Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah.
shot with where she's like just right here in the frame, and then the rest is green trees and just the setting, the scenery.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't help. There's that feeling of like, and we learned her backstory by then. So there's that
Yeah.
added level. Like I think if we hadn't gotten that whole other backstory of Maria, it'd be
Mm,
like, oh, that's a really creepy, unsettling frame. And it's still like it's oh, I love the composition of her just right here of the frame
yeah.
while everything is just, this negative space. But then you have this crushing backstory where you're like, oh man,
Fragility.
she's watching in
Yeah.
such, like crushing. It's less even this envy and this heartbreak too.
Mm,
It's
mm.
incredible. But yeah, no, those two, um, yeah, no,
Yeah,
those are the
you
ones
said
where,
that came through, that second one especially, because I was like, am I imagining this or is this the feeling it gives? It's great.
yeah, no,
Uh,
incredible. Being the complete dork I am for mythology, and myths and monsters and stuff like that. I'd love to know what kind of research went into this film for the folklore, the witch folklore, because there are some extremely, I would say, like uniquely compelling aspects to this folklore that I would love to learn more of, like the middle claw, or the the witching spit, like so interesting, like tangible things that I think, well, there's nothing I love more than something as uh, mystical as fantasy being physically brought to life. So
Yeah.
what kind of research went into that stuff?
Oh, I mean, I researched a lot, and then I was looking for specific things within the region because I was trying to, ground it in as
Yeah.
much of a reality as possible. But there actually just wasn't a lot that I felt connected to. I actually created all of that.
That's incredible.
In the
That's
course.
incredible.
And but I love that you said tangible, because literally I was like, okay, there's this one element that's supernatural in the sense that it's we have women who can be witches, and that means they can transform into other
Hmm.
people or creatures. And the rest, I was like, how do I keep this as grounded and earthy as I
Yeah.
possibly can, and as palpable, so tangible, essentially.
Hmm.
um, and then everything around it was created around that, and to try and keep it as cohesive and as non-invasive, so that like all the mythology and rules were kind of just within the DNA and kind of in the background, rather than things we
Hmm.
have to keep explaining or
Yeah.
whatever.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, but I don't even remember how you came to it specifically, but
It's truly some of my favorite creative aspects of the film, because I mean, after the initial transformation, like the first close up one we see with the cat, it's done off camera. With the wolf, it's far away. With her mom, it's done off camera. So when you get that first one from Sarah to Numi, and it is it is very, you get a physical reaction from something like that. And
yeah.
Matt told me that was Numi's first like shot, is her
Yeah.
death.
And even just that scene, like originally as written, you've seen the script when it comes out eventually. It's
Mhm.
sort of, it wasn't supposed to be as lengthy and detailed sequence as it became. Again, it's
Mhm.
that thing of like when you're making a movie, gradually you realize there's this moment that gives you this feeling, but there's this other one that you also want to present. And I realized almost the night before, we're gonna need to show a lot of this
Yeah.
transformation. And I went up to my so the person who did the prosthetics, Larry Van Dijnhoven, wasn't on set because of COVID. Unfortunately, he was stuck in
Yeah.
Australia. But someone who worked with him closely, Camila Basi, was on set, and then there was our Serbian makeup head of makeup. Dušica Vuksanović is her name. So they were on set, but the prosthetics side, I speak to Camilla a lot more, and then so I just ran to her and I was like, okay, we can do this and this tomorrow. All of this is ridiculous, and I'm sure we don't have any of it, and it's entirely my fault. Let's put that aside. What do we have? And then she's like, well, we have this and this and this because Larry planned for this and this and this. And then, I went to Dušica and I was like, okay, so if we do this, we could do it. And yeah, so suddenly we kind of improvised a little at night as to what's doable. And then what goes into that transformation that seems, usefully unnoticeable to people is how much the actress is doing the heavy lifting,
Oh,
especially
I
Sarah.
mean,
None of that
there's
was us. Like we didn't set up a rule for how someone transforms,
I was
and that's
squirming in my seat.
it's
I
one take. She's doing that all in one take, and again, Maddie was very careful with. I mean, I gave him the frame in terms of what I was after,
Mhm.
and then he kind of, and he's also operating. So this whole time, like he becomes an extension of me. Is what I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
like. Um, but then he builds on what I've said, and so he framed it in a particular way where a lot of that scene doesn't have VFX. It's very
yeah.
much aesthetics and tangible. And then yeah, he's framing her, and like we all become very close with the cast and the crew, so they kind of feel very safe, and they don't need to worry about whether something's going to be caught. They know
Mhm.
kind of, but they don't even need to worry about setting themselves in a certain way. It's like they're just living it. And then Sarah had almost no warning. I mean, thought of the night before what we're doing in terms of like extending that sequence. And then she just did did it instinctively, but she does it. I remember watching it just on a monitor, and it was. I would look up, and it would just be unreal because you're like, "What's happening in front of me right now?" It's
Yeah.
just like, again, the feeling of this is definitely a movie, but also like, how is this all just coming together? That whole sequence where she
Unbelievable.
goes into the barn up until she becomes Numi, and then Numi becomes this person. Like,
Yeah.
it felt so weirdly effortless, and it's
Yeah.
just such a complicated sequence that we had to plan for, in so much detail in many ways. And then what happened on the day, just the film kind of came alive by itself. And what the two of them, specifically Numi and Sarah, managed to do, like, and they just met the night before very briefly. Like,
Wow.
there wasn't that much.
Phenomenal.
I mean, we had. I'm close with each of them individually.
Yeah.
We're both very close friends, so I'd spoken to them, and we've been in this world, but they don't really even know each other. And suddenly we're doing all this, and most of those shots only had one take, like, because I'm like, well, we have it, so let's keep going. There's 800 other things we have to do, and and they were quite straightforward to edit as well, which was very helpful because there's a lot to do in the edits.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't sit still during that first transformation. And what I love most about that first transformation, I also told Matt, is it's a very informative part of the movie, in that, the rest of her transformations, we see her, kill Boris, and then suddenly she's in his body feeling out, that this new grown body. And then we don't even see it happen for Bilyana. So, but in the back of my mind during the rest of them, I have that in my head, no matter what, watching this. And I'm imagining the physical, like I couldn't sit still when she's kind of she somehow conveyed perfectly in that first one what it must feel like to put someone else, like bits of someone's organs, inside your chest. This is the thing.
These are the performances that need to win awards, not the ones where you have snappy dialogue, you deliver snappily. Like, it's, anyone can do, like, anyone competent can do that.
Yeah.
This is a person creating feelings that are tangible in a world that barely exists.
Absolutely.
And you don't even, like, that's the thing though. It doesn't feel like acting. You don't think about the craft that's gone into it. So I just, I mean, Sarah's going to be my next movie, and the one after that, hopefully. I mean, unfortunately, there are smaller roles, but I'm like, we need to, like, work together forever.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Something to do with Numi, as in looking for. I'm trying to write a couple of things for Numi as well. And our movie actually is going to be the next movie as well. So I feel like I found my family, I found my tribe.
Truly, I mean, it's such a like there's a simpatico to it all, I mean, and that edit, that the way that the camera floats around them, like, omnipotently, and it's almost, I was telling Matt, it's very much like you can replace Sarah's narration with, like, David Attenborough, and it becomes a witch National Geographic type thing, right? You can hear, like, as she rips open the heart, and it's very much like
the Macedonian female.
The witch is a mess. It's just so tangible is the only word I could think of. You can feel everything. You can, right down from, like, the almost like the temperature of the blood to the hay underneath them, to the feeling, like the way those claws look, so not like fake finger extensions. I think sometimes I think a lot of, like, prosthetic things, if you have, like, someone have long creepy fingers, you can either see an indent or you can feel like it's maybe goofy looking, but this one was, like, animalistic and very
organic, right?
Truly, like from the way that they pop out to the rest of them, like the rest of the movie, them being very curved, and it's just there's a very, very physical aspect to everything. You can feel everything on the frame. This might be my anxious curiosity, but I need to know if there's any significance to the fact that the names of the people Nevada takes the form of all start with the letter B. Is that just?
Oh, no, it didn't start off. I mean, I definitely wanted it to be the same letter, but I didn't. It's not connected to anyone I know. That's what you're asking.
No, I think that's just incredibly interesting. Basilica Boris and Bilyana. There's something.
It helped unify them in my head, really. It's how it comes down to. And then, I mean, the names are kind of related to names I would have heard in that region at the time.
Yeah.
And also I was thinking what was easier to pronounce for people who aren't from Macedonia. But also, their energies, I think all of them are people my grandparents were friends with. Like,
Wow.
I would have those names, and not necessarily people I would know very well in my life, but I
Mhm.
would hear them a lot when I was little. So that's where it kind of comes from. And then, yeah, I did want to keep it to one letter, but then also, again, it's that sense of the same way an image can click when the
Yeah.
name settled. I'm like, it clicked, and I didn't have to question it even to myself.
Mhm.
Once it feels right, or once it stops feeling wrong, is the way I should
Yeah,
phrase it.
yeah,
I'm like, okay, this is good. This is good. Next thing.
it was itching my brain. I was looking through my notes and I'm like, hold on a second. This can't be an accident. Well, yeah. Well, this was incredible. Thank you so much for, this opportunity to talk with you. I would actually just one last thing. I would love to know a little bit more about what you're working on now, just a tiny premise or
Oh yeah,
something.
for sure. I mean, it's very different.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what
Yeah,
Matt said. It
yeah.
takes
And
place in,
then
late
I'm working
90s
on,
and
we're finishing one now. We're in Adelaide right now doing the color grading on Oven Age, which Matthew Tron also shot, and Bethany Ryan, a production design, and then Christina Seaton is the producer of, with Sam Jennings. So it's the same team. But yeah, it's very different. It's set in the 90s in a suburb of Melbourne. I kind of so the Macedonian mountains are kind of my background, or I mean, when I was little, they were very present for
Mhm.
me. And that was a setting that I'm very fascinated. So, okay, when I was growing up, I was a film nerd,
Mhm.
like from age 12 onwards. And to me, real life always happened where the movies were, and what was happening to me in day to day is just irrelevant.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not necessarily very interested in seeing myself on screen, but definitely the places and the settings where I grew up with, I kind of feel like if I put them in a movie, I will feel like, I will feel more part of the movies, and the movies will feel more part of me. So the mountains were this one part, and now it's the blandest place in the world, which is the northeastern suburbs of Melbourne, where I spent my teenage years and came
Well,
of
there you go.
age,
You brought it
and
to the.
discovered sexuality so that I could do very twisted sex scenes in period films. At first, they had to be quite simple. So yeah, this movie is set in 1999. For three quarters is in 1999, set across this one day where a 17-year-old boy, a ballroom dancer, kind of wakes up he thinks the day is going to be one thing with this girl he loves, then it turns into something else entirely, and then he finds another person he connects with, and we see them across this 24-hour period, and then we see them 10 years later again when the
Oh
next time
boy.
they see each other. So yeah, it's a love story. It's a lot. It's kind of grungy.
Mhm.
I think there's a grungy element to this film that probably will be a lot clearer once you see my other work, that you're gonna, I think a lot of people don't notice it because, obviously when we're watching films, we're looking for patterns. And I think the more people get to know my sensibility, other things will emerge and you won't be alone as well. But yeah, it's as different as it possibly could be, but it's also very much about looking for intense connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah.
I'm expecting that sense of universal, connection to be
I
very prevalent.
definitely was looking for it to try and make it in as specific a setting and as uncinematic a setting as possible to make something very cinematic and very universal. So yeah, I'm very happy with it so far, but yeah, not many people have seen it, so I could be very delusional right now.
Well, I look forward to talking with you about it when that drops too.
Great. No, I look forward to talking to you about it. Like, I love that someone has even just some of the words you're saying, I'm like, literally, that's things I had in my head I didn't tell people about. So it's just uncanny that they've come across, we've never even met. And that all
Yeah.
of this trust you.
And I feel like I know
It's
you.
really
Yeah.
moving for me, genuinely. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me. If you guys want to follow the podcast, you can go to my YouTube channel, Comedian of Cinema, or if you can go on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find the podcast. How's it going to end?